In this video, I'm going to take this Helium Hotspot and turn it into our very own node box. This is a Syncrobit Helium Hotspot that I had pre-ordered way back when, back in probably like 2020 timeframe, 2021, whenever Syncrobit launched. I actually was one of the first pre-orders. And so I've had this unit for a very long time. And the rewards really aren't that great with Helium anymore. And so I'm looking to repurpose this. So being an original unit, this actually has a Raspberry Pi Compute Module 4 in it. And what we're able to do with that is we're able to take that out and actually put that into like a carrier board and turn this into a full-blown Raspberry Pi. So what I have here is, and this is from DTV Electronics. I picked this up on Amazon. DTV is a Bitcoin-centric company based in the UK. And you can actually see their information right here. So dtvelectronics.com. And they have this nice little package, and you can get this on Amazon. I actually got this with next day delivery. So it came fairly quick. And it basically has that carrier board, but it also has a case in it. It also has a power supply. So this should have everything we need in it to get this converted over to this. In addition, I also have, and we'll be opening this up here in a minute, I have a, which should be a low profile heatsink for the CM4 unit. And we also have a 2 terabyte NVMe. And what you're gonna notice is this is actually a double-sided board. So if we flip this over, take a look at the back, you can see our top, our CM4 is gonna snap in here. We've got our typical Raspberry Pi GPIO expansion, all of that. But on the back side, we have an SD card slot, which we won't be able to leverage. I'll talk about that here in a minute. But we also have a M.2 for a 2280 length drive. So that is what we have here today. Now my goal for this is to get this up and running as a full node box that I can run and basically compile and run any nodes that I want. This will be an ARM-based system versus being a regular like x64 based system. So it'd be a little bit different for me to have for running some nodes and doing some testing. But in addition to that, if we can leverage that M.2 slot, then I'm gonna also provide 2 terabytes of storage on the storage network. So this will actually be providing decentralized storage, but also being able to run nodes and things like that. And so if you're not aware, I do run, I have about 5 different systems that I'm running master nodes on. So this is actually going to be adding a 6th one. So in addition to using it for testing, providing on storage, I'm also going to be running a bunch of master nodes on it as well. So we are going to start. I'm going to go ahead and open the heatsink. Let's take a look at this. Just make sure we've got everything in here. So what we end up with this, and again, I picked this up off Amazon as well. This may not be needed, but I did want to put a heatsink on the CM4. So we've got a super low profile heatsink here that's going to slot right on there. And they give us the thermal transfer pads with it, and they also give us the screws to actually mount it to the CM4 board. Now, before we jump into this, I want to take apart the Syncrobit, and these are actually super easy to get apart. So we're just going to unscrew the antenna up here, pop off the washer there. And then we've got some screws on the back. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these out. And once we've got the screws out, we can kind of separate this a little bit here. And you just gotta be careful, there's an antenna wire. So we're gonna go ahead and pop that antenna off. Disconnect the top there. And now we have this base station. So we've got, there's little pins holding this in. So we wanna start back where the ports are. and we're just going to push over on this little tab. That'll lift up, and then the back we can swivel up and out. So we've got the top of the case off. Now we've got our circuit board, and the CM4 module is actually under this big heatsink. And so I'm going to go ahead and get this off. There's just 4 screws on the bottom of this. All right, once we get those screws out, we can just kind of swivel this back and forth and then lift. And what should happen here is you'll see some thermal paste there. So we've got paste on the IoT module, and then over here, this is actually the Raspberry Pi CM4. So let's go ahead and set the heatsink to the side there. And we can just pop this up. Now, there are pins that run under the board here and under the board here. So you just want to watch and make sure you don't put too much pressure. And now we have that out of the way. And this kind of gives you a shot of what that PCB looks like for the Syncrobit. You can see there was an SD card slot here. Notice how there's no SD in here. The reason for this is this unit actually has a CM4 unit that has an eMMC built onto it. That means we have storage built into this in lieu of an SD card. So the way the Raspberry Pi BIOS and firmware works is it will actually, you flash your operating system onto the eMMC, and then it will boot off of that instead of that SD card. So we won't actually be running a micro SD card. Our operating system will be living on this. However, we should still be able to put the M.2 drive in and have that as a second drive in the operating system. So that is what we are hoping for. So I'm just gonna grab some isopropyl alcohol. I'm gonna get this thermal paste all cleaned up, and then we'll get into the CmRat and see if we can get this thing docked in and talk about how we're gonna program this eMMC for an operating system using this kit. All right, we've got the compute module cleaned up a little bit here. And one of the things, a couple things here I wanted to point out. So this has Wi-Fi on it. This is obviously our CPU. We've got, it looks like 8 gigs of RAM, and it looks like about a 32 gig eMMC here. And the heatsink is actually going to provide heat dissipation to all of those. Now, if you notice, it covers up, this specific heatsink will cover up the Wi-Fi module that sits right here. However, this is the antenna port for the Wi-Fi module, and it allows room for you to actually snap in a external cable there if you want to. So in the event when we put this on, if we have this blocking our radio waves and we're not able to get enough Wi-Fi signal for where we're going to put this, then we could always use an external antenna. However, for me, I'm going to be plugging this in with Ethernet, so that won't be an issue for me. So now let's go ahead and get this open. So as I mentioned, this is the CmRat from DTV. So this is their full kit. And right off the bat, you can see they do include a screwdriver with the kit to probably take apart the case if we need to. They also include a USB-A to USB Type-C. In the event that you need to use that, we won't be needing to use it. And they do come with a 12-month warranty. And so this gives you information on how to set up and do the registration for the warranty. And you're going to notice, because they are in the UK, they actually provide all of the individual regional power adapters. So this is the one that we're going to need. But they also provide all of the international ones as well. So there you can kind of see all of those. We'll go ahead and set all those other ones to the side. And let's go ahead and get out the power adapter. So you can kind of see that it's got a little bit of a swivel lock mechanism in here. So these are actually slotted. So we'll go ahead and put that in. And it'll be a little bit of an angle. You're gonna turn it, and it's gonna click, and it's gonna lock in place. So that gives us our power adapter. And now let's pop out the board. So we can see we've got red on the bottom, black on the top. So a really nice look for where I'm going to be placing this. We've got 4 screws on the bottom, and we can see the control board's already inside here. Really nice metal casing. This is metal, this is not plastic. So let's go ahead and get this box moved out of the way. And we're going to get these screws taken out here. And they do include that little screwdriver that you can use. But I'm actually going to use my bigger one here. All right, we've got our 4 screws out now, and we can just kind of lift that bottom, and you can see that immediately exposes the M.2. So in the event you want to replace the M.2, you don't actually have to take everything out. You can kind of just take that bottom cover off and put the M.2 here. And they do have a little piece of tape over the standoff here for the M.2. So you just want to make sure that you peel that off. But we're going to go ahead and pull this out. You can kind of see that all metal look on the inside there. And if we flip the board over, there is our CmRat board. So we've got a jumper here. So one of the unique things about this board is it works with a whole lot of compute modules. So in addition, so I have this Raspberry Pi CM4 here. There's also a CM3, there's also a CM5. Ragsda also makes their own versions, and Orange Pi also makes their own versions. And what they have here is pretty much all of them are supported here. You can view that on their website. But there's a little jumper here. If you're using a Ragsda board, you have to put a shunt on these 2 jumpers. And then moving on over, right here, you're going to see there's a USB-C and an OS boot toggle. What this should allow us to do is when we put this into USB-C mode and we dock our unit onto here, we should be able to hook up a USB-C cable to the computer and actually flash the eMMC. So in addition to this, being a full docking board that's giving you that compute capability, leveraging the CM4, you don't need something like this. So if you've watched my channel before, the last time I flashed this when Syncrobit went out of business and I flashed a Nebra firmware on it, I actually had to buy one of these. And this basically allowed me to program the eMMC. And so this had a similar switch. So we had a USB or a boot switch, and that would control that. That is actually integrated into this board, which is a really nice feature because if you do have that eMMC, you need a way to program it, they give that to you in this board. And I will tell you the cost of this, when I bought it, was about the same cost as this whole kit. So just just something interesting there that, that maybe they're overcharging for, but we'll see. And then, obviously this kit's a great deal, in comparison to what Nebra was charging for that. In addition, you can see we actually have a full 4-pin fan header. And then that's actually going to allow us to run, so that is a full PWM fan there, which is interesting to see. We do have a little bit of a different GPIO port. You'll want to check their websites on the specs of this. You'll notice it's not the full length GPIO port. I believe it's a little bit shorter than what you would typically get on a Raspberry Pi. And then moving along the side, so we've got a micro HDMI out, we've got a USB-C, we've got our Ethernet, we've got our 12 volt power. We have already coming on this unit a PoE switch. So the Syncrobit was actually PoE powered, and I actually have one of these right here. This is a PoE injector that would allow you to power the device over Ethernet versus needing a dedicated 12 volt power cord. This works with both. So you can use a PoE injector and I could power it here, or I could use the power supply they gave me, which is what I'm gonna do, and do the 12 volt. So it comes with that PoE basically built in there. And then we talked about on the back, that SD card, because we have a eMMC module here, I don't think we're going to be able to take advantage of the SD slot. However, we should still be able to take advantage of the M.2. Now, the one thing that I noticed kind of right off the bat, so the casing itself doesn't have any mounting for fans. However, there is plenty of room from where this thing will sit. So you could run a lot taller heatsink than what obviously I got a super low profile one here. You could run a little bit of a taller one with a fan on there, and then that will actually vent out the top. So if you look here, the vents sit right over that CM4 module. So you can do that. Just know that you can't mount the fan to the enclosure. You're going to be mounting it to whatever heatsink that you get there. In addition, it did not come with a M.2 screw. It's okay, I have a PC screw kit, so we'll go ahead and grab an M.2 screw. I am going to peel this off to expose those threads. Now, I'm not going to plug in the M.2 yet because I want to program the eMMC. So what we're going to do is you want to line up the screw holes here. And then you're just going to snap that in there. So you just put a little bit of pressure on both sides. That's going to snap right in there. I'm not going to put the heatsink on yet. We want to make sure we can program it. So we're going to flip this over to USB-C, which is what we have it on. And now I'm actually going to grab a laptop and a USB-C cable. We're going to plug it in. We're going to see if we can flash this with the Raspberry Pi imager. We've got our USB cable and we've got our unit. Now, before we plug this in, we want to launch a Raspberry Pi imager. If you don't have that already, you can just head on over to raspberrypi.com/software. And if we just scroll down a tad here, you're going to see download for Windows link. Go ahead and download it, or for whatever operating system you're on. And then you're going to download and install that. And I already have it installed. So we're going to go ahead and launch it. And I want to plug this in. So as a reminder, we've already flipped this over to USB-C. And I'm going to plug in the USB-C cable. We're not going to do any power. Just going to plug it straight in. And we can hear it ding. We can see that we've got a red light here. Basically showing that it has power. And then we've got a green light here as well. Let's go ahead and just set that down there. And now I'm going to do choose device. We've got a Raspberry Pi 4. For choose operating system, I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. And I'm going to do other general purpose operating system. I'm going to do Ubuntu. And I'm going to do 24.04 server, because that is the long-term support version as of the recording of this video. So I'm going to do, we don't want the desktop version, we want the server version. So that's going to be Ubuntu server 24.04, 64-bit. Now we're going to do choose storage. If when you pop up to select the storage device, and if you don't see anything and your unit is powered on, it may be that you don't have the driver installed. So you want to hop on over to github.com/raspberry pi/USB boot. And then you're going to go into the Win32 folder. And then once you're in there, there's this rpi boot setup.exe. You're going to go ahead and download that. I just downloaded it. So let's go ahead and run it. Run the installer. Yes. Next, I agree. And this is going to install the USB boot. Now, all this does is this allows us to interface with the Raspberry Pi over USB. So it's going to go ahead and install that driver. And again, this is just needed in order to flash the eMMC, which is what we need to flash for our operating system. Once it's done, go ahead and hit next here. Then we can say finish. And if we close this and we do choose storage, you see that it's still not going to show. But what we need to do is hit start. And there's an app called rpi boot. You're actually going to see it here. It's CM4, CM5. That batch file, we're going to go ahead and run that. And now if we hop on over, close this, hit choose storage. Now you can see it. So we've got our 32 gig. Oops, let me pop that back up here. And you'll see, so it mounted that to the D drive, and you can see that is our 32 gig MMC that is built into this unit. We're gonna hit that. Then we're gonna hit next. And it's gonna ask us if we want to apply any customizations. I'm actually gonna do this. So I'm gonna do hit no here. So we're going to set the host name of our device. And I am just going to call this Pi Node. And actually we're going to call this Pi Node 1. And here we can set our default username and password that we want the operating system to use. And I run a lot of my stuff with MMPOS. So I'm going to go ahead and set up the same credentials that I set up for my other node boxes. We're going to go ahead and also set up our Wi-Fi while we're in here, which is kind of optional, but we're going to set it anyways. And then we'll set our time zone, and we'll also set our keyboard layout to be, I believe it is EN-US. Just maybe scroll down through here. I believe it might just be US. It is just US. So let's go ahead and do that. And we need to set our Wi-Fi country. Make sure you come down and you set US on this as well. And once we have all that information in here, we're going to go ahead and hit save. Once we have all that information in, we want to go ahead and make sure we head on over to the Services tab and check Enable SSH. We're going to need this to connect to the system. And we're going to just do password, and then if we have our options, I think we're all good with that. So let's go ahead and hit save. And we want to apply the customizations. And we're going to say yes. And now this is going to write the operating system to the eMMC. And what you're going to see is you're going to see a little bit of a flicker happen here. Might be hard to come across on the the phone or on the camera, but it'll just kind of flicker a little bit there while it's writing. And eMMCs aren't necessarily the fastest thing in the world, so you can kind of see that green light will come like on and off periodically, but it is writing over to that. You can kind of see, might be a little bit hard to see. We've got the red light and the green light coming on and off. But it's going to take a few minutes. So we're going to let this write and verify. And then once it's done, we should be able to pop our M.2 in it and actually boot it and connect to it via SSH. The flashing's done. And so we can hit continue here. And we can actually take this and flip this over to OS boot. And I'm going to unplug it. I'm going to plug it back in. We've got our power light on. We've got our activity light on. And we can see our activity light might be hard to see on the camera, but the activity light is going pretty rapid. So at this point, the system should actually be booting up. So we're going to give this about a minute or two, and then I'm going to hop on over to my router and see if I can see the IP address of it. While that's going on, we want to install PuTTY. We can just type PuTTY and we can head on over to putty.org. We can download PuTTY. And if we scroll down, I'm just going to download the standalone. Can go ahead and launch that. And if I remember right, we called it Pi Node 1. May not be up yet, so we're going to give it a couple minutes and then try to connect to it. And there we go. So we actually closed it, reopened it, type Pi Node 1, get prompted, we hit accept, and now I'm going to log in. So our credentials that we entered should work here. It may be a little bit slow because it's probably doing the initial setup of everything. But if we go ahead and bring this up and we do an LSCPU here, we can see, so we've got our x64 ARM. We've got 4 cores. So we've got 4 A72 cores. So that looks great. And if we do a free-M, we've got 8 gigs of RAM. And if we do a df-h, we have 25 gigs available on the operating system. So this is great. This means that it is up and running. Now we haven't plugged the M.2 in yet. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut it down, and then we're going to put in the M.2 and make sure that we can detect it. So if we do a fdis-l, we can, oops, we need to do a sudo there. And we can see that we've got our eMMC here. And that is it. So we're going to go ahead and turn this off, put it in, and turn it back on. So let's go ahead and unplug it. That will actually turn that thing off immediately. We can flip that over, and we can grab this and slot it in. We're going to go ahead and slot that in there. And I've got a M.2 screw. All right, we've got our M.2 screw in. So now, before we put this in the enclosure, I am going to put the heatsink on, because when I took that off, it felt pretty warm. So we're going to go ahead and put on our thermal pads. And so this is interesting because this actually covers up all the chips except for the Wi-Fi module. We got the NVMe on, and we've got the heatsink on, and touching it, it's a little warm, but it is certainly keeping it much better than what it was. So I can put my hands on here and be okay. And so it's on, it's booted. So now we're gonna hop back in the PuTTY and let's see if it is connectable. Which it is, so we're gonna go ahead and log in here. All right, and now if we do a DF-H, see here, okay. So we got our eMMC there, obviously, and just doing a couple quick checks real quick. So we've got our processors good, and let's do our memory check real quick. 8 gigs, we're only using about 521 megs, so that is good to see. Now, the important check, let's see if the NVMe is detected. So to do that, we're going to do a sudo fdisk-l, and it is. So we've got our NVMe here, and it is 1.8 terabytes. You can see it's got a Linux file system on it. I'm going to go ahead and wipe this. So we're going to do a sudo wipe fs-a on dev nvme n1, and it wiped it. So now if we do a sudo fdisk-l, you can see there's no partitions on it now. So now we can do a sudo fdisk, and we're going to do /dev /NVMe0 N1. Go ahead and hit enter here. And it's going to tell us to hit M for the menu if we want, but I already know the command, so I'm going to do an N. This is going to create a new partition. And we want a default of primary, and go ahead and hit enter there. It's going to be partition number 1. We can hit enter. It's going to ask us the starting sector. 2048 is what we want. And then we want it to be the max size of the partition. And it's going to tell us, it already has an ext4 signature. We're going to say, yeah, go ahead and remove that. And then we need to do a W to write it. All right, and now if we do a sudo fdisk-l, we can see we've got our Linux partition 1.8. Now we want to do a sudo mkfx.ext4 /dev /nvme n1 n1p1 for the first partition. And this is going to format the partition as a fresh ext4 file system. All right, now we should be able to do, let's just make sure that we don't have a data folder. We do not. So we're gonna do sudo mkdir/data. Now we're gonna mount our NVMe. So we want mount /dev /NVMe0 N1 P1. So that's going to be the first NVMe drive and the first partition on that to /data. And we need to do a sudo on that. So that should be a sudo mount. Now it's going to mount it. So if we do ls/data, we can say we just have lost and found. But if we do df-h, we now have that /data partition, and it has 1.7 terabytes of usable space. So now to make sure it mounts on boot up, we need to do sudo nano /etc/fs tab. And in here, we're going to do /dev/nvme NVMe0 N1P1 space /data, that's where we want it to mount, and then space ext4 space defaults, comma, no fail. This means if it can't detect the drive, if it gets corrupt, or we just remove it from the board, the system will still boot without it. And then space 0, Control X, Y, enter to save. And we're just gonna double check that. So it wants to be dev NVMe0 N1P1. We've got dev NVMe0 N1P1. Do Control X. Now if we do a sudo reboot, now the system's gonna reboot. And when it comes back up, we expect it to auto mount to that data folder. And if you've been noticing, I've been doing all of this powered over just a USB port on an old laptop. So everything has been powered just through that USB-C 5-volt rail. We haven't put really any major power to the board yet. We haven't even plugged in the official power supply. And so we've been able to do all of this functionality. It's basically fully working just off of the USB-C connection, which is pretty awesome. Okay, it's rebooted, so we're gonna go ahead and log in. And now if we do a just a df-h, we should see that data folder, which we do. So you can see here, it auto-mounted the NVMe to there. So we are good to go. The system's all set up. So now at this point, I'm going to go ahead and unplug that. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here a little bit. And we can put the unit back into the enclosure at this point. So to do that, we're just going to take the unit. As a reminder, we've got everything assembled. We're not using the SD card slot at all. The operating system is running off of the eMMC. We've got our heatsink on here, our low profile heatsink. And we're gonna take this, we're gonna put it upside down so that the NVMe faces up and the ports line up. And we're just gonna set that right down in there. Fits really nice. And then we're gonna take our bottom cover. Let's go ahead and put that back on here. And we're gonna put our 4 screws in. And we can use the screwdriver that was included and go ahead and secure those screws. And these are going to go through the bottom panel and then through the PCB and then to the top panel. So there we go. We've got that all together now. And now we just are going to undo power cord. We're going to plug in the power cord and make sure that the system boots up with power being supplied over this power adapter versus the USB. So go ahead and just pop this in here, turn that port on. And on the front, it's going to be kind of hard to see on the camera, but there are actually 2 little pinholes here for those LED indicators to kind of come through. So we can kind of see it's flashing green and red, which means it's booting. And You can see that the PCB is kind of sitting here. So we've got all that airflow coming right up. And right here is that PoE adapter. And so we've got all that room in there. If we did want a fan, certainly you could run a fan. We're not going to run a fan on this unit. We're just going to run with the low profile heatsink. If it ends up getting too hot when we're compiling software, then we may throw a fan in there. But for now, we're going to see how well it does as is. Okay, it is booted back up already. So let's go ahead and get logged in here. And let's just double check everything. Everything should be good. Yep, we still have our data drive mounted, and we are using 500 megs of RAM. So we've got 7.3 to 7.5 gigs of unused RAM that we're able to leverage. We can also create a page file here, or swap space in Linux as they call it. And that'll give us kind of that virtual memory. And we've got our storage. So that is kind of everything set up and running. And that's all that we're going to cover in this video. I know this was a really long one, kind of talking about the assembly, how we converted the Helium Hotspot over to this. If there's any content you guys want to see covered using this, knowing this is an ARM-based device, so we've got quad core, so we've got 4 cores, we've got 8 gigs of RAM, and we have an ARM-based system running Ubuntu x64. So any node software, any, maybe like storage provider, or, just compiling, running Docker, anything like that. If you want to see anything covered, definitely let me know. And we can cover that in some future videos. But as of right now, that is pretty much it. We are up and running with the DTV CmRat.